Good day, dear participants of the Second International Conference on History, Theory, and Methodology of Learning. First of all, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to the organizers of the conference, colleagues of the Kryvyi Rih State Pedagogical University. Thank you very much for the excellent opportunity to present the results of the research and for the excellent organization of the conference. Today, I'd like to present the findings of the research of the group of the scholars of the Comparative Education Department, Institute of Pedagogy of the National Academy of Educational Sciences of Ukraine. Our research is focused on the priorities of the education reforms at the level of secondary education in the comparative vision. On slide 1, we underline the topicality of our research. We consider the study of the reforms is to be very topical. On this slide, you can see how we substantiate the topicality. Firstly, since 1991, Ukraine has been implementing the education reforms aimed at integration of the national education into the European and the prospective world space. It is obvious that integration presupposes synchronization of the key parameters of the national education with the world and European standards. Respectively, understanding the global trends of education development is important. And finally, comparative studies are becoming more and more relevant. On slide number 2, we present the methodology of our research. So, the objective of our research is to conduct the comparative analysis of the secondary education reform priorities in Ukraine in comparison with the selected countries of the world. To do this, the following research questions were asked. What are the education development benchmarks at the global and European levels? What are the common characteristics of the reforms that countries are implementing guided by the global and European benchmarks? And is secondary education reform in Ukraine harmonized with the reforms implemented worldwide? On slide number 3, we speak about the reasons of the country's selection. The following countries were selected for the comparison: the People's Republic of China, the Federal Republic of Germany, and the Republic of Poland. China was selected for the analysis as a leading country in the global space. The success of the secondary education reform in China is reflected by the results of China in PISA 2018, in which students from China ranked #1 among other countries. An analysis of education reforms in the European Union is important for Ukraine in the context of its political course towards European integration. In view of this, the following European countries were selected for the analysis: Germany as one of the leading countries in Europe, and Poland as the European Union member state, Ukraine's neighbor, and the country with the common socialist past. Moreover, according to OECD PISA 2018, international ranking, Polish school children are the third best in Europe at maths and science, and the fourth best at reading comprehension. The 2018 PISA study shows that German school children are performing at above average levels. Slide 5 demonstrates the results of our study. In particular, we report that traditionally, a state determined the directions of education development, forming the vision of the model of citizens training for professional activity and coexistence in the community. Under globalization, transformation of the format of the national education policies development takes place. International agencies of the global level, such as United Nations, UNESCO, OECD, World Bank, European Union, and the Council of Europe began to play a key role. Slide number 6 presents our conclusion based on the analysis of the Inchcon Declaration Education 2030 towards inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning for all, and the European document, the Strategic Framework for European Cooperation in Education and Training 2020, that shapes the education policy in its member states. Based on the analysis, we state that the analyzed countries take into consideration the key benchmarks of the education development proposed by the international organizations. These are the equal access to education and the quality of education. Slide number 7 presents the position of the countries regarding the concept of equity. There are two dimensions in this concept. The first one is whether overall levels of provision are sufficient and of the right kind. And the second one, participation, primarily of the particular groups, ethnic minorities, disadvantaged segments of society, women, etc. In the course of our research, we find out the common characteristics of equality reform. They are the following: overall accessibility and affordability of preschool education, universalized secondary education, low level of school failure and dropout, avoiding early tracking, equal opportunities for urban and rural areas and for men and women, special attention for target groups. Speaking about the aspects of quality, it is slide number 8. We are to stress the concept of skills or competences in Europe in particular as its basic component. The standards in the analyzed countries are shifted towards learning outcomes design, integrating, of course, subject knowledge and basic skills, transversal competences, personal and social skills, ICT skills, and moral values. Slide number 9, concluding our presentation, partly presenting the main aspects of the conclusions. Firstly, each country has its own education system formed under the influence of historical events and developing in the authentic political, economic, and social context. Secondly, under globalization, within the strategic guidelines of the international organizations, there is a synchronization of directions of education development in the countries, both in Europe and in the world. Thirdly, based on the analysis of the legislative and regulatory documents determining the development of education in Ukraine, and the results of the monitoring conducted by the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, it was concluded that the development of the Ukrainian secondary education is harmonized with the key parameters of education development in China, Germany, and in Poland. These are ensuring equal access to education and improving the quality of education. Thank you very much for your attention.